The Book of Werewolves, Chapter 4, The Origin of the Scandinavian Werewolf. Advantages of the Norse literature. Bear and wolfskin dresses. The Berserker. Their rage. The story of Thor. The passages of the area. The evening wolf. Escalgrim and his son. The Delirium of the worlds Hamar and Vargar. Laws affecting outlaws. To become a boar. Recapitulation. One of the great advantages of the study of Old Norse or Icelandic literature is the insight given by it one of the origin of the world superstitions. Norse tradition is transparent as glacier ice, and the origin is as and unmistakable. Medieval mythology, rich and gorgeous, is a compound like Corinthian brass, into which many pure ores may have been fused, or is a full turbid river drawn from numerous fibers which had their sources in remote climes. It is a blending of primeval Celtic, Turonic, Scandinavian, Italic, and Arab traditions, each adding a beauty, each yielding a charm, but each accusation rendering the analysis more difficult. Pasquale says the Anno flows into the Tiber, pure as crystal meets the tawny stream, and is lost in it, so that there is no more Anno, but the united stream is all Tiber. So it with each tributary to the tide of medieval mythology. The moment it has blended its waters with the great onward rolling flood, it is impossible to detect it with certainty. It has swollen the stream, but has lost its own identity. If we would analyze a particular myth, we must not go at once to the body of medieval superstition, but strike at once at the tributaries before its absorption. This we shall proceed to do in selecting Norse mythology. We come upon abundant material pointing naturally to the spot whence it has been derived, as glacial moraines indicate to the direction which they have taken and point to the mountains whence they have fallen. It may not be difficult for us to arrive at the origin of the Norse belief in werewolves, and the data obtained will be useful assisting to indicate much that they otherwise prove obscure in the medieval tradition among the Old Norse. It was custom for certain warriors to dress the skins of beasts that they had slain, and thus give themselves an air of ferocity calculated to strike terror into the hearts of their foes. Such dresses are mentioned in some sagas without there being any supernatural qualities attached to them. For instance, the Najala, there is a mention of a man, Jihindi, in goatskin dress, much the same way we do wear of Harold Hagvar, having his company a band of berserker who all dressed in wolfskins, Onhundir, and this expression, wolfskin coated, is met with man's name. Thus, the Holmsjöver saga, there is a mention of a Bjorn, son of Ulfhedin, a wolf-coat son of Ulfmar, wolf-shaped son of Ulf, wolf, son of Ulfmar, wolf-shaped, who could change forms. The most conclusive passage is in the Vatsandala saga and is as follows. Those berserker who were called Ulfhedinir had of wolfskins over their mail coats. In like manner word berserker used of a man possessed of a superhuman power and subject to access of diabolical fury was originally applied to one of those Doherty champions who went out in bear shocks or habits made of bearskin over their armor. I am well aware that Bjorn Haldorsson's version of Berserker, Bear of Sark, of Destitute of Clothing had been hitherto originally received, or generally received, but Sivishborn Eglisson, as an indisputable authority, rejects this diversion as unintentional and substitutes for it which I have adopted. It may be well imagined that a wolf or bear skin would make a warm and comfortable great coat to a man whose manner of living required him to defy all weathers, and that the dress would not only give him appearance of grimness and ferocity, likely to produce an unpleasant emotion in the breast of a foe, but also that the thick fur might prove efficient in defending the blows rained on him in conflict. The Berserker was an object of aversion and terror to the peaceful inhabitants of the land, his avocation being to challenge a quiet country farmer to single combat. As the law of the land stood in Norway, a man who declined to accept a challenge forfeited all his possessions, even to the wife of his bosom, as a poltron unworthy of the protection of the law, and every item of his property passed into the hands of his challenger. The Berserker accordingly had unhappy man at his mercy. If he slew him, the farmer's possession became his, and if a poor fellow declined to fight, he lost all legal right to his inheritance. A Berserker would invite himself to any feast and contribute his quota to the hilarity of entertainment by snapping the backbone or cleaving the skull of some merry maker who incurred his displeasure, or whom he might single out to murder, for no reason than to desire to keep his hand in practice. It may be well imagined that popular superstition went along with the popular dread of these wolf and bearskin rovers, and they were believed to be endued with force, as they certainly were with the ferocity of the beasts whose skins they wore. Nor would superstition stop there, but the imagination of the trembling peasants would speedily invest these unscrupulous describers of public peace with attributes hitherto appropriated to trolls and Jotuns. The incident mentioned in the Volsung saga of the sleeping man being found with their wolf skins hanging to the wall above their heads is devised as its improbability if we regard these skins as worn over their armor, and the marvelous in the whole story is reduced to a minimum. When we suppose that Sigmund and Sigfuli stole these for the purpose of disguising themselves whilst they lived a life of violence and robbery, in a similar manner, the story of the northern Beauty and the Beast in the Horolf saga Kraka is less improbable on the superstition that Bjorn was living as an outlaw among the mountain fastnesses in bearskin dress, which would efficiently disguise him, but all his eyes, which would gleam out of the sockets in his hindermost visor, unmistakably be human. His very name Bjorn signifies the bear, and these two circumstances may well be invested in the kernel of historic fact with all the romance of fable, and if devised of these supernatural embezzlements, the story would resolve itself into a very simple fact of there having been a King Herring of the Epdales who was a variance with his son, and whose son took to the woods and lived a berserker life in company with his mistress until was captured and slain by his father. I think that the circumstances insisted on by the saga writers of the eyes of the person remaining unchanged is very significant, and the points to fact that the skin was merely drawn over the body as a disguise, but there was other ground for superstition to fashion on the berserker and invest them with supernatural attributes. No fact in connection with the history of the Norsemen is more firmly established on reliable evidence than of the berserker rage being a species of diabolical possession. The berserker were said to work themselves up into a state of frenzy in which demoniacal power came over them, impelling them to acts from which their sober sense they would have recoiled. They acquired superhuman force and were as invulnerable, as insensible to pain as Jansen's, the convulsionist of Esmedred. No sword would wound them, no fire would burn them, a club alone could destroy them by breaking their bones or crushing their skulls. Their eyes glared through a flame burning in sockets. They ground their teeth and frothed at the mouth. They gnarled at their shield rims and are said to have sometimes bitten them through. As they rushed into conflict, they yelped as dogs and howled as wolves. According to the anonymous testimony of Old Norse historians, the berserker's rage was extinguished by baptism, and as Christianity advanced, the number of these berserker decreased. But it must not be supposed that this madness or possession came only on those who participated themselves to be attacked by it. Others were afflicted with it, who vainly struggled, I'm going to turn the page, against its influence, and deeply laminated their own liability to be seized with these terrible excesses of frenzy, such as Thoror, Ingrid's son, of whom it was said that the Vatnsdalella saga that it was times they came over Thoror berserker fits, and it was considered a sad misfortune to such a man that they were quite beyond control. The manner in which he was cured is remarkable, pointing as it does to the craven and heathen mind for better and more merciful creed. Thorgrin of Korsna had a child by his concubine Verdr, and by order of his wife the child was carried out to the parish. The brothers Thorstein and Thorir often met, and it was now the turn of Thorstein to visit Thorir, and Thorir accompanied him homeward. On their way, Thorstein asked Thorir which he thought was the first among the brethren. Thorir answered and replied, "That was easy for you, are above us all in discretion and talent. Jakol is best in all perilous adventures, but he added, I am the least worth of us brothers, because the berserker fit come over me, quite against my will, and I wish that you, my brother, with your shrewdness, would devise some help for me." Thorstein said, "I have heard that our kinsman Thorgrim had just suffered his little babe to be carried out at the
instigation of his wife. That is ill done. I think also that it is a grievous matter for you to be different in nature from other men. Thorir asked, how could he obtain release from his affliction? Then said Thorstein, now I will make a vow to him who created the sun, for I ween that he is most able to take ban of you, and I undertake for his sake in return to rescue the babe and bring it up for him, till he who created man shall take it to himself, for this I reckon he will do. After this they left their horses and sought the child. A thrall of Thorir had found near the Marum river. They had saw that a kerchief had been spread over its face and had rumbled it up over its nose. The little thing was all but dead, but they took it up and fitted it home to Thorir's house and brought the lad up, and called him Thorkel. Rumpel, as for the berserker fits, they came on him no more. But the most remarkable passages bearing on the subject will be found in the Aglia. There is a man, Ulf the wolf, by name son of Bajelfi and Halbera. Ulf was a man so tall and strong that like of him was not to be seen in a land at a time. And when he was young, he was out Viking expeditions and harrying. He was a great landed proprietor, and it was his wont to rise early and to go about men's work or the smithies and inspect all of his goods and his acres. And sometimes he talked with those men who wanted advice, for he was a good adviser. He was so clear-headed, however, every day when it drew toward dusk, he became so savage that few dared exchange a word with him, for he was given a dozen in the afternoon. People said that he was much given to change in form, so he was called the evening wolf. In this and the following passages, I do not consider Hamora to have its primary significance of actual transformation, but simply to mean subject to fits of diabolical possession under influence of which bodily powers were greatly exaggerated. I shall translate pretty freely from its most interesting saga. I consider that the description is given on it of Kevdolf in its greatly elucidates of our subject. Turn to the page. Kevdolf and Skallagrim got news during the summer of an expedition. Skallagrim was the keenest sighted of men, and he caught sight of the vessel of Halvard and his brother and recognized it at once. He followed their course and marked the haven onto which they entered in even. He then returned to his company and told Kavdolf of what he had seen. Then they busked them and got ready both their boats. In each they put 20 men, Kavdolf steering one and Skallagrim the other, and they rowed in quest of the ship. Now when they came to the place where it was they lay to, Halvard and his men had spread an onwarding over the deck and were asleep. Now when Kavdolf and his party came upon them, the watchers who were seated at the end of the bridge sprang up and called to the people on board to wake up, for there were danger in the wind. So Halvard and his men sprang into arms. Then came Kelvoldolf over the bridge, and Skallagrim with him into the ship. Kelvoldolf had his hand a cleaver, and he bade his men go through the vessel and hack away the awning. But pressed on the quarter deck, it is said the werewolf fit came over him, and many of his companions, they slew all the men were before him. Skallagrim did the same as he went in the round vessel, and his father paused not till they had cleared it. Now that Kelvoldolf came upon the quarter deck, he had raised his cleaver and smote Halvor through the helmet and head, so that the haft was buried in the flesh. But he dragged him so violently that he whisked Halvard into the air and flung him overboard. Skallagrim cleared the forecastle and slew Stilgrid. Many men flung themselves overboard, but Skallagrim's men took to the boat and rowed about, killing all they found. Thus perished Halvard with 50 men. Skallagrim and his party took the ship and all the goods which had belonged to Halvard, and fitted it and the wares to their own vessel, and then exchanged ships, landing their capture, but quitting their own. After which they filled their old ship with stones, brake it up, and sank it. All good breeze sprang up, and they stood out to sea. It is said that these men in engagement, who were werewolves, or those whom came the berserker rage, that as long as the fit was on them, no one could oppose them. They were so strong, but when it had passed off, they were feebler than unusual. It was the same with Kavdolf when the werewolf fit went off him. He then felt exhaustion and consistent on the fight, and he was so completely done up that he was obliged to take his bed. In like manner, Skallagrim had his fits of frenzy, taking after his admirable father. Tharlord and his companion were opposed to Skallagrim in the game, and they were too much for him. They wearied, and the game went better with them, but at dusk, after sunset, it went worse with Ingil and Thord. For Skallagrim became so strong that he caught up Thord and cast him down, so that he broke his bones, and at the death of him. He then he caught at Inglil Thorgrad. Break was the name of the servant Skallagrim, who had been foster mother to Ingil. She was a woman of great stature, strong as a man, and bit of a witch. Brax exclaimed, Skallagrim, are you now falling upon your son? Then Skallagrim let go hold of Egil and clutched at her. She stared aside and fled. Skallagrim followed. They ran out upon Digris, and she sprang off in the headland into the water. Skallagrim cast after her a huge stone, which struck her between the shoulders, and she never rose after it. The place is now called Brax Sound. Let it be observed that in these passages from the Agila, the words ad, hamaz, hamaramar, etc. are used without any intention of conveying the idea of a change of bodily shape, though the words taken literally assert it. for they are derived from humor, a skin or habit, a word which has its representatives in other Aryan languages and is therefore a primitive word assessive of the skin of the beast. The Sanskrit kamar, the Hindusian can, hide or skin, and karma, leather, and the Persian game, clothing, disguise. The Gothic ham or hams, skin, and even the Italian camicia and the French chemise are cognate words. It seems probable, accordingly, that the verb adhamaz was first applied to those who wore the skins of the savage animals and went about the country as freebooters, but that popular superstition soon invested them with supernatural powers, and they were supposed to assume forms of the beast in whose skins they were disguised. The verb then acquired the significance to become a werewolf, to change shape. It did not stop there, but went through another change of meaning and was finally applied to those who were afflicted with the paroxysms of madness and demoniacal possession. This was not only the word connected with werewolves, which helped on the superstition. The word vagur, a wolf, had a double significance, which would be the means of originating many werewolf story. Vargur is the same as urar, restless. Argar being the same as Anglo-Saxon erg. Vaglar had its double significance in Norse. It signified a wolf and also a godless man. This vagur is English word in the word werewolf and the guru of varu in French. The Danish word for werewolf is varulf. The Gothic Werwolf and the Roman Die Gardin. It is lu veru sanglet bieste in the V. Dies Heldefons by Golder de Coincy. Silon desiv sil lau goral si sunt divo quosal ni punt ister de nos moder. The Loup-garou is a devil. The Anglo-Saxons regard him as an evil man wearing a scoundrel Gothic varies, a friend, but very often the word meant no more than an outlaw. Pluglunt in Contents Populares tells us that the ancient Norman laws said of the criminals condemned to outlawry for certain offenses, wargus esto be an outlaw. In like manner, the Lex Repetoro tit 87, wargus sit ho est expulsus, in law of Canute, he is called Werewolf. Legis Canutui Sigmund I-148 and Celtic law tit 57 orders Psi Cors corpus jam sepulchrum efflutit ont exploratot wargus sit, if anyone shall have dug up or despoiled an already buried corpse, let him be a varg. Sidinus Apollinarius says, unam finimium quorum forte varguam hoc imnim nominae indigenas lactoturus non compent, as though the common name by which those who lived in a freebooter life was designated as Borg. Like manner, Polgraves assures us in his Rise and Progress of the English Commonwealth that among the Anglo-Saxons, the Uchla, or outlaw, was said to have the head of a wolf. If then the term vargur was applied at that time to a wolf, that in other to an outlaw who lived the life of a wild beast away from the haunts of men, he shall be driven away as a wolf and chased so far as men chase wolves. Farthest was the legal form of sentence. It is certainly no matter of wonder that the stories of outlaws should have become surrounded with mythical accounts of their transformations into wolves. But the very Adonam of the Norse was calculated to foster the superstition. The Icelanders had curious expressions which are significantly likely to have produced misconceptions. Snorri not only relates that Odin changed himself into another form, but he adds that his spells he turned his enemies into boars. In precisely the same manner does the hag, Lejoit, in the Vedastela saga, say that she could have turned Thorstein and Jokol into boars to run about with the wild beasts. And the expression Vidra at Gudrui or at Gijotrum, to become a boar, is frequent with the sagas. Thereupon came Thorin and his men, and upon them and Nagili led the way, but when they saw weapons draw, he was frightened, and he ran away up the mountain and became a boar. And Thorin and his men took to run, so as to help Nagili, lest should tumble off the cliff into the sea. A similar expression occurs in the Gili saga, Sorcenar P50, and Horolf's saga, Kraka. We met with a troll in boar shape, to whom divine honors were paid, and in the Kajaliza saga, men are likened to boars. Then it began to fare with them as it fares with boars. Then they fight each other, for in the same manner drop their foam. True significance of Verda act Geloti is to be such a state of fear, to lose the senses, but significantly a particular or a pericular, to have given rise to superstition stories. I have dwelt some length on the northern myth relative to werewolves and animal transformations, because I have considered the investigation of these all important towards the elucidation of truth, which lies at the bottom of the medieval superstition, and which is nowhere so attainable through the Norse literature, as may be seen from the passages quoted above, as length and form and explanation of those merely referred to. The result arrived at is pretty conclusive, and may be summed up in very few words. The whole superstition, or the whole superstructure of fable and romance relative to transformation into wild beast, repossesses simply on the basis of truth that among the Scandinavian nations there existed a form of madness or possession under the influence of which men acted as though they were changed into wild and savage brutes, howling, foaming at the mouth, raving for blood and slaughter, ready to commit any act of atrocity, as irresponsible for their actions as the wolves and bears in whose skins they often equipped themselves. The manner in which fact became invested with supernatural adjuncts, as I also pointed out, to wit, the change in significance of the word designating the madness as a double meaning of the word vulgar, and all above, the habits and appearance of maniacs. We shall see instances of berserker rage reappearing in the Middle Ages and late drawn into our own times, not exclusively in the north, but throughout France, Germany, England, and instead of rejecting the accounts given by chroniclers as fabulous because there is connected with them and which seems to be fabulous, we shall be able to refer them to their true origin. It may be accepted as an axiom that no superstition of general acceptance is destitute of foundation of truth, and if we discover the myth of werewolf to be widely spread, not only throughout Europe, but the whole world may rest assured that there is solid core of fact round which popular superstition has crystallized, and the fact is existence of species of madness during excesses of which the person afflicted believes himself to be a wild beast and acts like a wild beast. In some cases, this madness amounts apparently to positive possession and diabolical acts into which the possessed is impelled are so horrible that the blood curdles in reading them, and is impossible to recall them without a shudder.